Good day, traders. Welcome to a new week. As always, we start off by looking at the economic releases that are due this week, so we can identify any potential volatility that could come on the back of that. I'm not going to go through all the releases this week. However, I will look at the key ones that may impact the US equities market and therefore the price of Bitcoin and subsequent altcoins. Now, on Wednesday, we could expect the US ADP employment change. This figure tends to be reflected in non-farm payroll figures. That's due on Friday. So it's worth keeping an eye on that. One thing I've noticed is that the markets don't react that much to ADP figures. However, they do have an indication of what happens in non-farm payroll. So you can kind of use them to gauge on where NFP is going to end up. The following day, we have initial jobless claims that come out. Again, this is a big figure. Anything that impacts unemployment, relates to unemployment, will always have an impact on the interest rate decisions, and therefore it's worth keeping a note on. Then obviously on Friday, we have NFP. Now, for those of you who do not know what US non-farm payroll is about, it's an indicator of the health of the private sector in the United States. It effectively, everything that's non-farms, in other words, non-public sector. So they've taken a whole lot of the public sector jobs away from this number, and so it only looks at the private sector, and therefore it gives a good indication. Now, just from experience, I noticed that the markets tend to react quite violently to this, so we will get volatility. However, the markets tend to go back to where they were anyway. There's normally a big shock and then they come back again. And so it's something that you want to make sure that you're not really in a position during this time. Or if you are, you just have some very good risk management. So something worth keeping an eye on. But as we go towards high volatility events, the markets tend to be a little bit muted, even though initial jobless claims should be a big number, but tends to be muted because people are expecting the US numbers to come out. Now, in terms of our risk management and our trades over the weekend, I'll go through where amendments that's been made. One is that I exited the drift position. We had 105, a size of 105. We got in at 0.71. Again, we were risk-free on this trade. However, I want to see how it was reacting to us going into last week's GDP figures, and I cut that position at 0.79 so that I could have capital available to put into our other positions if we needed more margin. Now, we got stopped out of Sol, so we took a bit of a hit in that one, but then again, we had a profit on drift, so we net positive on that. In terms of radium, we're still in that position. Drift, we re-entered that position for the same amount. You can see there we got another long position at the same level as well. So I'll go through that on the charts now, just so we can all be clear about that. And right now it's trading at 0.81, so we're up about $10 on that trade. Again, we stopped out of Sol. That released the margin that we had. I put that back into drift, but then drift went up. So we aligned our stop loss at our entry again to 0.71. That released the margin again, and then I used that to take a position in near. So right now we have one risk-free position in drift and two other positions, one in radium, one in near. So very similar to last week, only I switched Sol for near. So if we go into trading view, we can see here that this is drift. Just want to quickly show you where we were on Thursday. The markets were going down into the GDP figures announcement. It bounced off there, went up. I saw it was caught underneath this descending line. So this is where I cut the position over there at 0.79, was about there. And then we sold off. We got stopped out of our Sol position about there, and that released the margin. I then went back into drift, and I'll tell you where I got into drift and why I got into drift is that we were there, it came down, just touched on this line and then shot up. So as soon as it went up, I saw it had a nice big wick that bounced off, still very bullish on drift. So I re-entered that position right there. Okay, so as you can see, after the being stopped out, taking profit, going back in, etc., the account's 25.14, and we got a profit of $7 at this point in time. You can see we're in drift for the exact same amount as we were before, at the exact same level we were before. And then we've got radium. Again, we did not get stopped out of this one. I actually added a little bit of margin to radium just to ensure that we didn't get stopped out on the spike down after GDP figures came out. And then we've got a new position over in NIA. So let me just back up into Bitcoin. I'm not going to make this too long, but just to a recap of where we are. As I mentioned beforehand, we kind of went up here. We had this line that came up like this, kind of like that beforehand. You can see it broke through. And we had this wick that broke through. And so I did mention that I was a little bit apprehensive about going back into Bitcoin, just because it just did break down a little bit. And then we went down and bounced off this diagonal line here. You can see it's kind of touched there. Now, I didn't have this line on beforehand. The reason being is, the reality is you can kind of draw diagonals everywhere you want to, really. We could have had one there, another horizontal here. I mean, there's loads of lines that we can create from these patterns. And the key is to just take a step back, find out where the major ones and how they're reacting to them. So I did not take a long position here, but I did use it when I was looking at NIA, as we just mentioned, and I used it to take a position over there. Quite frankly, I think that if we look at Solana actually reacted far nicer when it came out of that position. So it might have even been better for me to go back into Solana instead of going into NIA. That being said, you know, I'm not gonna worry too much about it, because we are in profit at the moment. It is kind of bouncing up like this. However, Solana does have a higher market cap, which means that when we start getting to the higher numbers, it is, you know, I want more bang for my buck, as it were. So NIA does have a higher beta. So when we start drifting to the upside, I could see us doing, you know, 2, 3, 5, 10x on NIA a lot easier than I can on Solana. So if we do this up to about there, I mean, we're looking at about 200% move when we want to get to these levels up here. On Solana, just to get back up the all-time highs, you're looking at, it's a 20% move, but if we had to go up 200%, I mean, now we're up here. Okay, now we're up in the 600s or so, somewhere around up here. That is going to be a massive move, specifically given the market cap of Solana. So that's effectively where we are. We are long drift, NIA, radium. I'm expecting a move upward now. I think that these levels in Bitcoin are holding nicely. I would expect something like this to pop up like that, maybe retest this level, and I'm still expecting us to break through that descending line, maybe hit our heads there, boom, get up to there, and then we can expect like a flush into this timing band, and then we're off we go. So that is kind of the part that I'm expecting, and I'm aligning. Now just remember that when we start pulling back off these levels, I will probably cut a lot of my altcoin positions, just because I do not like to short altcoins. I will short Bitcoin if I have to, but this is kind of where we are at this point in time. Again, drift is looking very good. I'm happy with this one. I'm expecting drift, as we mentioned. Yes, the triangle went up, broke above, came down, retested, a little bit of a wick down to hit the 50 EMA, and now we're bouncing off that one. I expect this, you know, drift is looking really good to the upside. I'm expecting that to go like that, and maybe even break through this resistance here, go through it onto another line, and then go like that, and then up. I mean, I am very bullish on drift, so That should look good. I'm holding that position nicely. Great, guys. Have a great week, and I'll speak to you later.